Hello YouTube, Ben here. We are back with a new deck discussion video for you all today. It's been a while since we've had one on the channel, so hopefully you guys enjoy this one. Today especially we're going to be talking about a very spicy and polarizing deck within our community, and that deck is Blue Hybrid. Blue Hybrid, for those of you who don't know, really hit its heyday back in BT7 when it really just ran rampant within the community and at a lot of our competitive events as well. It was a deck that really epitomized what Blue as an archetype wanted to do, really all in one package. It was really focused on board control, was able to dictate tempo, and it also maximized the player's ability to manipulate memory and really utilize its resources as efficiently as possible to go for lethal. It was the first deck in the game to introduce the stun mechanic as well. Whether you love the stun mechanic or hate it with a burning passion, you have to admit that stunning is definitely a very strong and powerful tool that, if utilized well, can really turn the tide of the game quite quickly. And it is unique to Blue as an archetype as well, which is why personally I do enjoy it. The whole purpose of this video is to provide like a quick overview of the core engine that Blue Hybrid utilized back in the day as well as moving forward. And then towards the end of the video, we'll be talking about some of the support that it'll get in BT14, as well as a quick preliminary deck list that I've cooked together that kind of will give you folks hopefully an idea of what to anticipate when you see Blue Hybrid in future metas. So for those of you who already know or just don't want to relive the PTSD of Blue Hybrid, feel free to skip towards the end of the video. I'll have timestamps in the video description down below that'll link you straight towards sort of like the meat of the video. For those of you who don't know or kind of were introduced to the game after Blue Hybrid had its time, hopefully this kind of gives you a quick overview and recap of what it's about. So starting off with our Tamers, we kind of have to just start off with the one and only boy who now has been let loose and is going to be running rampant once again, and that's Tommy Himi from BT7. Tommy was truly, in my opinion, the heart and soul of Blue Hybrid, so when he got limited to 1, I think it really just took the gas out of the deck. But back in, full force, running this at 4, you had so much value for what this archetype and what this deck wanted to do. You're able to strip the 3 sources off your opponent's stack, and then you would have the ability to stun using multiple avenues, which really just took your opponents out of the game. At times, playing against Blue Hybrid became more of a spectator sport, if anything, because of what Tommy was able to do. And I think because of this, I think it was a right decision. But at the time, limiting it to 1 really just brought decks back to life again. Next tamer that was a staple in Blue Hybrid decks was BT3 Davis. You typically would run him at 2 to 3, mainly because it still is Blue's best memory setter. It lets you search your top 3 to pick up a blue piece, and kind of lets you have a good foundation at the early game to help set up your tamers a little bit more efficiently and effectively. The next culprit in the stunning mechanic, and truly Tommy's partner in crime, was BT5 Sorajo. Sorajo, when attacking, you were able to suspend the tamer to strip 2 sources off of opponent's stack. But I think what really gave a lot of headaches to a lot of opponents was the effect to give yourself 2 memory if your opponent had a Digimon without a Digivolution source. So if you can imagine, just with how much source strip was going on with Blue Hybrid and how much stun was going around, your opponents really now had to play around giving you that extra memory, because having 2, 3 Sora Joe tamers out would catapult you up 4, sometimes 6 memory, which when paired with Davis and other sort of resources that Blue has to manipulate memory was absolutely terrifying. So Sorajo was a key component, and I still think is going to be a very, very key component to Blue Hybrid moving forward. You could also sneak in tamers like starter deck Madashita, which was like a mini Sorajo and a cheap tamer to play out early game. When you had BT8 and BT9 roll around, you could also consider tamers like Matt and Sora, which late game also helped you manipulate your memory and give additional bounce mechanics to you. Moving on to our hybrids. you would probably run 4 of BT4 Strabimon. This was your early game searcher. Most often, you probably would just throw this guy out turn 1, turn 2, look for your pieces by looking at top 3, picking up a hybrid and a tamer as well, so represented a lot of value for the time. Bokomon was a consideration as well, mainly because you can search, and it also made your plays a lot more memory efficient. So Bokomon also was a very, very strong player in blue hybrid decks, so you typically would see at least 2, if not 3 Bokomons in your decks. Then you move on to your core hybrid engine, which is starting with BT7 Kumamon. He helped you source strip by on Digivolving, stripping 1 source from one of your opponent's Digimon. When you pair this boy with BT7 Korikakumon, that's where all the stun shenanigans really start to begin. So Korikakumon, which is a 2-cost to Digivolve on a Tamer, but also a 1-cost to Digivolve over another level 4, really paired its effect with Tommy almost perfectly. So if you Digivolve Korikaku on Tommy, you can stun something without a source. If you Digivolve Korikaku, say on top of a Kumamon, for example, you could also stun. So the condition was was an alternate condition. So you could have it over Tommy itself, or you could have it on top of another hybrid to stun. So you can just imagine the shenanigans that you could pull with either multiple Korikakumons, stripping multiple times with Kumamon and other ways, and then Digivolving with a Korikakumon to stun more, and then swinging with that stack to stun another one. So like you can stun 2-3 bodies right off the bat with this card, which really just caused people to lose their minds. And then when you go into your level 5, which is BT7 Beowulf, typically for a cost of 1, you would then be able to swing and bounce and recycle your hybrid, which really set, in my opinion, blue hybrid apart from all the other hybrids was its ability to recycle your level 4s. You know, because you are only running a finite amount of these hybrids, and sometimes if you either didn't see them, couldn't find them, or they got trashed for whatever reason, sometimes the other hybrid decks would be sort of short of luck. Blue hybrid was able to utilize its level 5 to just continuously recycle their hybrids to keep doing what they want to do. So I think just represented a whole lot of value within that core engine. And then we also got additional support in BT12 with the whole Lanamon line. And Lanamon really just represented another hybrid target for us. So for me, I personally will run about 10 hybrids in my deck just so that I can see them. I think any more becomes a little bit clunky, but any less, sometimes you run the risk of just not seeing them when you want to. For me, 10 was the sweet spot, and I think having that additional Lanamon is super, super helpful. Blue, being blue, has access to a plethora of options, and a plethora of options that really augment the source strip mechanic. So one of the first and most powerful option cards that is really slept on is BT6 Howling Memory Boost. It's a 3 to play, but you're able to strip 2 sources off of an opponent's stack and then subsequently stun one without any sources. So I think, in my opinion, a little bit better than Blue Memory Boost for this deck, mainly because with the amount of options and tamer cards you are running, you do run the risk of either whiffing on a Blue Mem Boost or bottom decking important tamers, important option cards that you don't want to lose out on. So I think Howling represents a lot of value for, especially with what this deck wants to do, and synergizes very well. And then when BT8 rolled around, we had another support option card in the form of Innocence Blizzard, which allowed you to strip 1 source off of 3 of your opponent's Digimon, and then subsequently stun up to 3 that didn't have a source, which was absolutely brutal, particularly coming out of security. Sometimes that was just enough to squeeze by and sneak by games. And then obviously EX1 had Ice Wall, which, I mean, Ice Wall is Ice Wall. It's pretty self-explanatory there. And EX3 introduced Ooyy, which I think is a very interesting support card for Blue Hybrid. During EX3, unfortunately, Blue Hybrid just wasn't as strong. You were probably seeing more Blue Flare, if anything. But I'm really interested to see what Ooyy is going to be able to do with Blue Hybrid, now also with Tommy, being able to strip just a crazy amount of sources with that. So as you can probably tell, this deck drove people absolutely insane, and has, as a result, has led this to become a very, very polarizing deck within the community. The people who love it will love it to death and swear by it. The people who hate it absolutely want to just burn this deck to the ground. So you may be wondering, like, why am I going on and rambling about this deck? Why should you care about this? Well, with the most recent restriction list, or if you want to even put it unrestriction announcement, we have Tommy coming back to a 4 of. Before limited to 1, but now he's free. He's set loose and he's able to do what he wants to do again. So as a result, I think we are going to be seeing a lot more blue hybrid than we're used to. Just because now with Tommy at 4, the deck is now viable again. Do I think it's going to be like a tier 1, tier 0 deck like it was back in BT7, BT8? Absolutely not. I don't think so at all. I still think it's going to be very strong. I still see it as like a tier 1.5 deck. But I do think the game has evolved in a way where we are able to manage Tommy a lot more than we were used to. We have a lot more ways to interact with Tamers. We have a lot more ways to also prevent source strip, right? BT9 X antibody just can't be stripped at all. So it's a card that will prevent stun, almost definitively, because it's never going to be taken away from your sources, thus limiting your ability to stun purely from a blue hybrid standpoint. So I still think there are ways to work around Tommy and what blue hybrid wants to do, but I still think it's going to be pretty strong and pretty prevalent. So I do think you need to be prepared to face it, be prepared to go up against it, and be prepared to know what it wants to do if you want to do well in these upcoming regionals and potentially nationals as well. So that's what this point of this video was, right? Is to kind of reintroduce this deck, talk about what it wants to do, and then talk about, ways to go about combating it. Now, I think ways around blue hybrid is really Black War Greymon, War Greymon. We're going to be seeing a lot of support for these decks in BT14, and its access to Hades Force is an absolute just death sentence to Tommy. Decks like Bloom Lord do suffer initially because you are putting out a lot of bodies, but being able to Quartzmon and just suspend all of blue hybrid's Tamers and take away that advantage that it can have from these is also going to be quite large. And I also think decks that are still meta, right, like Shine Greymon, Hunters, Crossheart, can still go faster than blue hybrid. Blue hybrid can be lethal, but it still takes a lot of time, a lot of setup, a lot of preparation, and in all honesty, if you can read that someone's playing blue hybrid, which you will be able to do almost right off the bat, you can play around it. You can prepare yourself to play around it. You can build your stack in the back and sort of be patient enough to go for either a big OTK play or a big play that sort of takes away their game plan from them. Because their game plan is really about stunning, leaving bodies on the board, and really preying off of that and taking you out of the game. But if you don't give them that opening, then they really don't have a lot they can do. They're stuck playing their Tamers and just waiting for you to do something, which really puts them in a rough spot, because if you're able to quickly OTK them and take away their advantage, then they're really just stuck in the water. So I think decks nowadays are much more equipped to do that than they were before, back in, like I said, BT7, BT8 era. So I still think it's something that you can play around and be successful with. So key additions to blue hybrid to be aware of in the next coming weeks, with BT14 dropping very shortly. First card I think that's going to be huge is the Digi-Egg, which is Bukamon. Bukamon, for those who don't know, if it gives you jamming if you have more sources than your opponent, meaning that if your stack with Bukamon has more sources or more Digivolution cards, then that card or that stack has jamming, which is going to be just forcing your opponent to make more decisions, right? If you're able to swing with a body, keep it on board because it has jamming, your opponent sort of has to make a decision now to say, look, do I get rid of it? Do I commit resources to dealing with this body? Or do I give them another check with jamming again next turn? Which, you know, I think really forces them to think and can mess up their game plan sometimes, and forces them to act maybe either too early or make a suboptimal play just to respond to what you have. So I think Bukamon is going to be a nice addition. But I think the bigger addition and bigger support card that we're going to be getting out of BT14 is the Zudomon Ace. So Zudomon Ace and Ace cards in general, I think, are going to be very fun to see how they interact with today's meta. This is the first time we're going to have like a wide gambit of Ace cards and not just the, you know, War Greymon Ace and Metal Garurumon Ace that we've had since, I believe, BT13. Now we have cards that'll interact during your opponent's turn. And with how often you're going to have level 4s either suspended or out on the field because you are a hybrid deck, I think Zudomon Ace almost plays perfectly into that mechanic. You're able to blast Evo into this level 5 and strip 2 sources off your opponent's Digimon and then subsequently bounce one that doesn't have a source. So they're really going to have to think twice before making a play, because if you have a level 4 out on board and you have these Zudomons in play, you can really just mess up their game plan by blast evoing, stripping sources, and bouncing something. So I think that adds another layer of thought process going into playing against Blue Hybrid with the addition of the Zudomon Ace card. And I think in general too, you were just lacking a level 5. The level 5 that you typically ran in Blue Hybrid decks was just your BT7 Beowulf. Now you have an additional target and an additional alternative to go into to help kind of give yourself another out, because I think typically you're stuck running this BT7 Beowulf. Either you didn't see it, it was stuck in security, or it just wasn't helpful to what the game state was. Sometimes you were just stuck in water. Now with the addition of Zudomon, I think you have a little bit more flexibility with some of the plays that you can make. So I really do think that this card's going to be a game changer for Blue Hybrid moving forward. So here is a preliminary deck list that I have going for you guys. As you can see here, we're running 4 of that Bukamon egg that I talked about. Just to give our stacks jamming, we're running 4 of the new Otamamon. This was not a card I highlighted, but I do think it's interesting. It is not a hybrid, so you can't search for it, but we do have the Inheritable, which is when your opponent attacks, they have to strip 2 cards off of one of their Digimon's Digivolution sources. So again, you kind of give them something to think about during their turn when they make their plays, because sometimes those Inheritables are important. For example, like things like War Greymon, Machine Dramon, Shine Greymon, like you really rely on your Inheritables to sometimes string along your combo plays. And if they're swinging and they're forced to take away some of these very important Inheritable cards, you put them in a pickle. So I think Otamamon's going to be interesting. I could see it maybe being bumped down to like 2 or 3 depending how my testing goes out. But for now, I'd like to see it at 4. We're running 4 of the BT4 Strabimon just for the search again. And then we run 2 BT6 Strabimon, which basically if you're swinging with something with hybrid in name, you gain a memory. It's just, for me, another hybrid target. Sometimes the memory gain will come up, but more often than not, it really doesn't. Then moving on to the level 4s, like I said, we're running that core hybrid package with 4 Kumamon, 4 Korikakumon, and 2 Lanamon. Again, not much to say outside of what already has been said. Just your core package right there. Level 5s, we're doing 4 of the BT7 Beowulf and 4 of the Zudomon Ace. Again, I think I could see it getting clunked up a little bit with 4 and 4. Maybe doing like a 3-3 split or something along those lines to maybe up my Tamer count or up my option count a little bit. But I do think having Zudomon Ace and seeing it's going to be important, which is why I ran it at 4. And I just am not really comfortable running Beowulf at any less, because it is still a really high value card and a really high value for what it's worth. You know, being able to bounce and stun with Beowulf is huge. So For now, I'm running a 4-4 split. We'll see how that ends up going. And then in terms of our top end, there's a lot of flexibility here with the top end. I'm running here 3 of the BT14 all-force, which may be an interesting tech to some. You know, I wanted to see how this works because it's an on-play, and when digivolving, you can strip 2 cards for every card with Royal Knights in play and Tamer that you have in play. Obviously, we're not really running a lot of Royal Knights, it's just the all-force, but we're running a good amount of Tamers, and late game, if you're able to set up your Tamers and go into an all-force, particularly with how easy it can be now to get into a level 5, you know, sometimes that can be a big thing, because when you do that, you can bounce something pretty easily now, right? Because you're stripping 4-6 sources sometimes, and then being able to bounce something without a source, and that's huge. So I'm curious to see how all-force works out. Again, I haven't really tested this list out, so I don't know how it's going to play out, but I'm keeping him at a 3-up for now just to see how he works. I can definitely see people making a case for like a Zulong Mon, with how wide board some of these decks are going. I could also see a very, very strong case for BT11 Mirage Galgamon, which is just a really good top end for blue in general. Being able to bounce and manipulate memory all turns is huge, so I definitely can see a case for BT11 Mirage as being the more main top end. You could go the toolbox route and do like one of each and just see how things go. But I think very interesting. I'm not going to be running Susanomon just because I think now there's so many deletion protection effects and it is very expensive to play that I feel like you've lost a lot of value with Susano. So I'm not running him. I'm opting to just run more options and more Tamers, which is why we're doing 3 Sorai, 2 Howling Memory Boost, and 2 Innocence Blizzard, and then the 1 of Ice Wall. And then in terms of Tamers, we're running 4 Tommy, 3 Sora Joe, 2 Davis, and 2 of the BT14 Joe Keto. Joe, I'm really throwing in there because he is a cheaper Tamer to play at a 3 of, so he's a good early game Tamer to just throw out there. You're source stripping a lot, so his effect to suspend whenever you strip a source to gain a memory will probably come up. So I think he can represent good early game value. And like I said, it's just an early cheap Tamer to play out because you do want to be able to set up Tamers somewhat early. So having a few like 2 and 3 cost Tamers to just put out there is, I think, super helpful. And it is easier to play around Sora Joe now. So I think having Joe as like a 2 of is not a bad option. And that's the deck. So for those of you who've made it through this video, you know, thank you. You know, we, like I said in other videos, you know, we really do appreciate all the support that the channel's gotten over the past couple months. And I know that this was a bit of a longer video and more of a discussion video, so thank you guys for listening to me ramble on about this deck. Hopefully this gives you a little bit more information on what Blue Hybrid is about, what it can do, and how to prepare for it moving forward. I definitely will be dusting off my Blue Hybrid deck come November 17th when the ban list is and unrestriction list is in effect. So I'm definitely excited to play this deck again. I know a lot of people are probably excited to play it, and a lot of people are probably wanting to cut my head off for saying that. But anyways, let's see how things go. It's going to be an interesting time. BT14 is just around the corner. We're going to have a lot of discussion videos coming in the next week or so about, you know, what cards are coming in BT14 and doing a really thorough set breakdown. So a couple of the guys and I will be doing those, so look out for that. And hopefully you enjoy this video. Hopefully you enjoy what's to come, and we will see you on the next one. Bye.